Well, good evening, SYM. We are happy for those that are able to watch this either live or if you're watching this later. You guys are probably wondering why we're set up in the kitchen right now, and it's because I have a big announcement that I'm going to be sharing with you all. So, I'll just grab the camera here. So, we have moved our coffee shop to our kitchen here. We have the machine, we have the blender, we have things like that. And the reason why we have this set up here is because, well, for one, I was worried about the coffee machine and the maintenance of it and having water just sitting there and calcium and all that stuff build up onto it. But on another thing, there was another idea that was brewing into my mind, pun intended. And the idea is over the summer, I want to be able to have our church be able to bless each other. And I'm starting up a new ministry called Blessed Forward. And the concept comes from those times where you've been in the drive through and maybe you're having a good day, maybe you're having a bad day, and you go to the till in the drive through and someone has paid for your drink or your food order that was ahead of you, and that whole premise of like feeling good, of feeling blessed and things, I want to bestow to our church family and with our coffee shop. And so I've been working on our website of doing online orders to the coffee shop, and that should be up and running here right away. And the whole point and the whole premise of it is for families to create an order online and to be able to have that order go to another family. And so the order can be any kind of frappuccino drink, latte, iced drink, whatever you want for that. And then as well, that will be included is a little note or blessing of appreciation of that family. And this whole premise, the whole reason why we want to do this is so that we can just show love and show appreciation to families and show that love in some of these times where negativity and divisiveness is there, just so that we can show that love and show that connection. So I'm hoping to have things up and running this week. You might be one of the many families that I contact to test and also just to show blessing to as we get this thing started. Second announcement we have is this Friday that we are going to be doing Zombicide again. And the way that this is going to work is much how I'm doing this announcement is we're going to have a Zoom call, and then my phone is going to be controlling the board. And so what's going to happen is that it's going to be tilted down on our table in the living room here, and people are able to interact with their pieces through the board. And what's nice about this game is that you only need a visual of it. And if you need extra help with some of the items or gear that you have, I have PDFs that will be sent out for you to know everything that you need to know about this game. This game is super fun. I've been working on this new campaign that I am excited to introduce, and all we need is players now to play it. So if you're interested, Friday at 7 p.m., I want to play some Zombicide, feel free to message me on any Facebook, Instagram, phone number, anything that works. And if you need any more details on this, feel free to let me know. Other announcements that include is that Magnitude is continuously doing their online camps, and like I said last week, I think that the best way that we can support our camps is to find ways to get involved with them and find ways to help them, because Bible camps are slowly in decline. And I think we know a little bit about that firsthand with our Bible camp not being able to function. And so I'd love to see Manitou be able to do these connect camps well. If you feel that this is not something for you, I would strongly encourage finding a way to donate online, because they have some future plans that I'm super excited to be a part of and to help out with as much as possible. So if you need any more details, find them on Facebook, find their website. You can find me. I'll probably just lead you to Seth, who will have more information and have that. And as far as other announcements go, if you may have missed it, our weekly schedule for Jill and I is Mondays we're going to be hanging out at Adventureverse from 4 till 7 roughly. This is just to be able to hang out, maybe catch up with anyone that wants to visit with us. And then Wednesdays, of course, we're going to be doing our Bible study. I'm super pumped about our study on Revelation tonight and how we're going to be getting through that in the summer. And so that's going to be Wednesdays. And then Fridays are going to be a little bit of a mix because I'm hopefully going to be doing more coffee talks, if you've seen those on Facebook, and trying to find key members of the community or people in our own church and try to get some information and the word out on what's happening in their lives. So that's going to be happening every occasional on Friday, but as well I want to host some games as well. So that could be anything from online games with the Switch, with the PS4, or this could also be Zombicide or other games that work where you can do it over video, or Jackbox games, whatever works. We are wanting to just be able to have as many opportunities to connect as possible as summer kind of hits and information keeps on coming here and there. So that's the plan for Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Again, any family that wants to connect with us, feel free to. We met with a few families last week, and it's just super encouraging to have that, and just to be able to hang out and hear how people's lives are going. And yeah, we really appreciate being able to do that and to be able to do what we can to just encourage people through this time as much as possible. So feel free to send a message out to us if you are feeling like hanging out. We're working through lists of families to try to hang out with, and yeah, this is super exciting. So just going to grab the phone here. You can see that I'd have a long microphone to do this because I don't have a wireless mic. And we're back in the studio, the very messy studio that I never seem to clean. How's it going?
Me?
Yeah,
Oh,
you. I'm talking to you. Your mic's not muted anymore, so.
Oh, hello.
Oh, man. So we're already kind of into summer months. How does that make you feel, Jill?
I don't know. Pretty much the same as always. It's summer, and I don't really like summer anymore. I mean, it's nice to have a teaching break, but it's hot and there's bugs and, that stuff.
My favorite season actually is winter myself, and I don't care what people say. It's my favorite one.
It's pretty. There's Christmas. There's hot drinks and sweaters.
No bugs, things like
No
that.
bugs.
So we are going to be getting into some worship, and then we're going to be going into the book of Revelation after. Actually, side note, we're actually not digging into Revelation tonight. We're going to be looking at some fun facts and things about Revelation. So, but before that, we have a few worship songs that we're going to be sharing with you, and hopefully they appear on the screen. Yes, they're a little bit bigger, except they're a little bit hard to see.
That's also the wrong song.
All Who Are Thirsty. Oh, no.
There you
that
go.
one?
That's better.
People haven't seen it because I didn't press the transition button yet.
Ooh,
So yeah, we're going to be doing 2 songs tonight, All Who Are Thirsty and The Kingdom. And so, yeah, feel free to worship with us at home. And yeah, let's start. And all who are thirsty. Oh, I sung in the wrong key. Sorry. Practice this, I promise.
Oh, who are we? Just come to the fountain. Dip your heart in the stream of life, the pain and the sorrow. Be washed away in the waves of His mercy. As deep cries out to deep, we sing, come, Lord Jesus, come. Come, Lord Jesus, come.
All who are thirsty,
All who are weak, just come to the fountain.
dip your heart in the stream of life, the pain and the sorrow,
Be washed away in the waves of His mercy. As the deep
cries out to deep,
we sing, come, Lord Jesus, come. Come, Lord Jesus, come.
Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit, come. Holy Spirit, come.
Just verse 1 now. All who are thirsty,
All who are weak,
come to the fountain,
dip your heart in the streams of life.
Nice. Next, let's do The Kingdom for all you Starfield fans out there. Or maybe you know him best now as Tim Newfield and the Glory Boys. This is back in 2010. I think this song came out.
Yeah. No,
No?
I think it was when we were in
Early?
college.
Oh?
'Cause I remember seeing it. Maybe it came out earlier, but I remember seeing it in college and being like, "What? They have a new album? I didn't know that."
Dang. I
Yeah.
didn't really start listening to Starfield till Jill, so I have no idea.
They're great.
Nice.
Oh, we have come to testify. Oh, our God is surely great. Oh, His love is like a river wide. So let everyone beneath His skies
Lift their voice and sing,
for the kingdom of our God carries on, carries on, carries on. Oh, His kingdom is inside of you. Oh, it's everywhere you are. Oh, celebrate your life made new. Come and let His freedom bloom. Lift your voice and sing, for the kingdom of our God carries on, carries on, carries on. For the kingdom of our God carries on, carries on, carries on.
everybody
Sing hallelujah. Everybody sing hallelujah. And everybody sing hallelujah. 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 Everybody sing hallelujah for the kingdom of our God carries on, carries on, carries on. For the kingdom of our God carries on, carries on, carries on.
Those are some high notes there. Sweet. So we are now into our lesson portion, and we are going to be looking at the book of Revelation. But before we even grapple into the book itself, I feel like there's some things to cover in this book that are very important. So I'm going to be getting this all set up because I wanted there to be slides, but I also want people to see us, and I don't want to cover Jill's face because she's so pretty. So there should be a little black box right in front of us here for some slides. So the book of Revelation. This has always been one of those books, I think, that has had some maybe taboo or maybe some weight against it because there's a lot of intense stuff that goes on to this book. I know for myself, before getting into Bible college or before really diving into the Bible deep, Revelation was always that book that people kind of warned me about in a weird way. And so for myself, I when I got to Bible college and I started reading through it, I started to discover that yes, there is a bunch of heaviness into this book, but at the very same time, there's also a lot of good stuff for us as believers to think about and to consider. And it also makes the mandate of what we're supposed to be doing as believers even that much more crucial in the world. And so, to give some interesting stuff about Revelation, I have some random facts here fun facts about Revelation. And it might be a little bit hard to see on the little box here, but I'll be scrolling through and reading them out here. So fun fact number 1 is before the Roman Emperor Domitian exiled Apostle John to the Greek island of Patmos, where experts say he wrote the book of Revelation, the emperor ordered him to be boiled in oil, but somehow John miraculously survived. And so this is one of those like testimonies where John was supposed to be killed and they just couldn't kill him because God had something really important to share through John and to write down. Fact number 2, the Romans used Patmos, located off the coast of Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey, as a penal colony. So a place where they send prisoners to essentially go live over there. You're not our problem anymore. Fact number 3, Revelation came to John in a vision, perhaps the reason for plentiful use of imagery and the difficulty so many people have interpreting it. I can't even imagine some of the things that John saw in the vision. That's probably why it's a little bit hard. Fact number 4, the book of Revelation uses 21 symbols beginning with the 7 lampstands representing the 7 churches in Asia Minor. Fact number 6, although firmly ensconced. Didn't look up that word. In popular culture, the word rapture does not appear in the English Bible. Rapture is an anglicized version of the Latin word raptus. R-A-E-P-T-I-U-S.
It's a Latin word.
Latin word. Fact number 7. Revelation is the only book in the New Testament that uses the word alleluia, indicating praise to God, and appears 4 times, all in chapter 19. Fact number 8. Revelation says that the forces of evil will gather in the valley of Megiddo in Israel, once called the ideal battlefield by Napoleon before the climactic battle of Armageddon. The carnage will be so great that the blood of the evil army will flow as high as horses' bridles.
Gross. Is there that much blood in the world?
I don't know. Like Red Sea kind of blood. So, fact number 9, Jesus just used one angel to bind Satan and throw him into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years, an indication of Jesus' power over evil. So, Jesus, one angel, you can do it. That's interesting. We'll have to see when we get to that chapter. Number 10, there will be no temples or churches in the new heaven God created because they are man's way of having fellowship with God. Such places of worship will be obsolete because man will be able to fellowship with God directly. It's pretty interesting. Fact number 11, this is the one that I had to probably do some research on later, which I didn't do just yet. Sorry, everyone. But the tree of life in the new heaven is a restored version of the same tree in the Garden of Evil.
Eden.
Not
Garden of Evil.
Oh man, that sounds like a wicked metal album.
Oh my gosh.
It
says Garden of Eden.
Yes, it does.
Those are very different places.
Yeah. So, those are some facts about Revelation, and some of those things we'll probably dispute or agree with, because what you'll find with Revelation is that there's a lot of opinions. And the first thing that we want to get for this study of Revelation is just to know that a lot of this stuff is for our benefit to know as believers, but at the same time, the stuff that isn't 100% clear, I think it's open for us to agree and disagree with some things, because there's a lot of opinions when it comes about end times and things like that. And I think the crucial thing is, for us right now, the most important thing is to have faith in Jesus, and then all the other stuff, align it with that. If your faith in Jesus is questioned with this, then I think you need to do some soul searching and to really challenge yourself on some of the things that come up with end times and these topics. And Revelation is a complicated book. You can just look at this slide right here below. This is a Revelation timeline chart, and there's a lot of itty-bitty words in there. You see the mark of the beast, you see some 4 horsemen, you see trumpets, you see new heavens, new earth, and you see all this stuff, and like it's saying that stuff happens here, but it also is related to here. Hey, look, there's Daniel here, and like...
Well, and like it's a prophetic book, so the likelihood that we're getting some of it wrong is probably pretty high. 'Cause like when you think about it, Jesus' birth, like the first coming was foretold, but lots of people missed it because they were still expecting a warrior, right? And so we're also expecting that. I mean, I do feel like it will be more of a battle this time, a very anticlimactic battle, but all the details of like what exactly is the beast? What is the mark of the beast? What are the 4 horsemen? Like, are we in part of Revelation right now? I mean, I think that's been a question for generations. Like in World War I days and World War II days, it's like, oh, this must be the end. And then it's like, oh, no, just kidding.
Well, even the Black Plague, too. Like, there's so many things in history that have happened where people like, must be end times. People are probably still thinking that it's end times, like even now with...
well, it's got to be at some point.
Yeah, like, well, technically it's end times because Jesus said, like, in the end of days, like, and pretty much everything after his crucifixion was end of days. Like, these are some long days. These are some really long days for us. So we're going to be looking... the goal is to bring clarity, but also at the same time to make this book not as intimidating, because I know for myself as a youth going through the Bible, Some of my Bible friends would use Revelation as like a threat sometimes, and the way that they would use it as a threat is be like, "Oh, you better make sure that you have everything right, or else you're going to be thrown into the lake of fire," and like kind of that fire and brimstone. And it actually made a little bit of an unhealthy relationship with God because I was always that kind of like shiver, like looking over my shoulder, making sure that like I'm doing good, and then when I did bad, like there's a huge amount of pressure of keeping that maintained. And I don't want to take away from anything. Like if you like, you should be doing good things and things like that. But Revelation's also a book about love too, and it's about Jesus coming back for his church. And so my goal is to maybe speak to some of the youth or kids or even adults that feel intimidated by Revelation, and to go through some of the hard stuff, but also to encourage you that this is God coming back for his children and his believers in the midst of chaos in the world, because it's only a matter of time like that we get into end times even more so, and these revelations start coming true for us. So some of the stuff that we can go over before we read is just the placements of some of this. So the scholars believe that Revelation was either written 90 AD or around 60 AD. And why this kind of matters a little bit is just because of perspective. So let's take 60 AD, because I didn't even really think that scholars believe this, but scholars believe a lot of things. There's lots of scholars out there. So the reason why they believe this is 60 AD is because the significant event that happens for Jews and Jerusalem is that 70 AD, Nero comes in with his army and just obliterates Jerusalem, comes in, just attacks, and like this is kind of the foreshadowing of what Jesus said is going to happen. I think is Matthew 25 that also links to end time stuff, but he gave some warnings that in those times, like, you just run because your city is going to be taken. And so there's a lot of that kind of doom and gloom theme with it. And it also makes John a lot younger, because if John, we don't really know his age. The disciples were said to be kind of young guys when Jesus had them. The oldest, I think, being Peter, because he had a wife or something like that, which makes you old. And the
You're
rest of
old.
them were kind of like that young adult teenager years. So if John was writing this, he would be more closer to the age of like 40s to 50s ish, which is significant because in the 90 AD, which is what I believe. Notification, which is what I believe the date was written. They You have John that's now probably in his 80s and 90s, which is crazy, because can you consider like an old man being boiled in oil and or like banished to an island where prisoners are everywhere? Like, it's pretty crazy to think about that. But it was in an account that Irenaeus, I'm not even sure who Irenaeus is in my studies, but he has an accounts that are dated at 90 AD because of the Emperor Domitian, who was the emperor that tried to kill John, and that his reign was around the 90 AD. So it kind of places it there, but you know how dates are with things like that. Like, that's not really that important when the grand scheme of things. It's just kind of those interesting things. So Revelation is, like Jill said, a prophetic book that has a lot of end times, a lot of kind of prediction and stuff to come into it. And it's actually really related to another book of the Bible that we'll see probably come up numerous times, and that's Daniel. And some of the cool things about the book of Daniel, and even Daniel himself, is that he was a teenager when things started to go rough for him in Jerusalem. In about like 570 or so, Babylon comes in, takes Jerusalem, takes everything from it, and takes Daniel and some of the well-gifted guys and trains them into the Babylonian courts. And so Daniel worked his way up, interpreted a few dreams, became a high official, And then through some years, Persia came over and took over Babylon, and you saw the different empires change forces, and then you have just these wild things that are happening when Persia takes over. Like that's where you get him in the lion's den. That's where you get some of his visions, and he was receiving visions even under the Babylonian rule as well. But you start to see all these things that he's seen, and sure enough, some of the things that he sees is the prediction of Rome coming in with some of the imagery that is placed there, that is also foreshadowed in Nebuchadnezzar's dreams and vision in chapter 2 of Daniel. And so you have all this stuff that's kind of happening, and then sure enough, in the next 100 years, Rome or Greece takes over, and then Rome takes over. And then during Rome's time, you have Jesus and the disciples, and then you have John, who spent lots of time with Jesus. And at this 90 AD point of his life, pretty much all the disciples are dead. Everyone that he went into ministry with after Jesus' ascension are gone, because like he's at an old age, and a lot of those disciples around that 60 AD mark died, like Peter, Paul, a lot of them. And he was kind of like the last, I would say, some of the last that saw Jesus. And so we get this revelation that's happened after all this stuff about what's to come. And like sure enough, Rome's empire falls, and then we get into more history of like the battle between forces of Europe. And then we have even more with like colonization around the world, the British Empire, and then world wars. And now we're up here, and I'm positive that with some of these visions and the craziness that John is seeing, he's seen some of these battles, and he's seen some of the stuff that's throughout history, and then ultimately stuff that we as people haven't even experienced yet and before. So there's a lot of stuff happening, and some of my personal opinions that come up with this book is that if you take the Bible as like God's words, inspired, true, and everything, there's God has this way of like making things match and add up super well. And that's why I think Revelation is not only like a past, present, and future book, but it's also something that's, well, I guess coming to my point, is a present book for us now to realize, because you have these references of Babylon that come up in Revelation. You have these references in Zechariah, some of the prophets, and then you have some of this weirdness of this, like, okay, we haven't seen that before, with these beasts of like 7 heads and things like that. At least maybe we have. Maybe it's like an organization that we're just not aware of.
Yeah, I think it's symbolic. It's not a literal
Thing coming
seven-headed
out of the ocean.
although that like post about that person that found 33 new creatures in a sealed off cave,
Oh yeah.
maybe that. No, I don't think. I think they're symbolic, and there have been different interpretations, I think, of that.
Mm-hmm. So one of the important things is actually the few last verses that I think is really important for us to also to consider, so we don't get too much of our minds boggling over all of this. Is that in the last few verses it says, "Whoever reads this and takes heart will be blessed," but um, in the last verses it says like whoever adds to this will be cursed, or will not be blessed. And I think that's really crucial when we start to add into our own opinions, and we start to get into some of the stuff about Revelation, that we be careful to not be so caught up in what we think is right with this, because we ultimately we want the Holy Spirit to be guiding our thoughts and our actions with all this. And it's really easy for us to be like, yeah, that means that, and people should not be doing that and that. But for us to really take back and be like, is my heart ready for this, or are there things that need to be removed for me to move on? And that's why I decide not even to dive into Revelation, but to transition into 4 questions that kind of lead into a study like this. And these 4 questions go as follows here. So, question number 1 is, do we need to fear the book of Revelation or be concerned at all? Question number 2 is, what uncomfortable thoughts come up when thinking about this book? What are your perceived speculations about the book? Where am I at with Jesus in regards to this book? And the reason why I like and came up with these questions is because these are a lot of the questions that I asked myself when researching this, but also some questions that were going through my mind in Bible college or as a youth or as a kid thinking about God and the grand scheme of plans and everything that's happening around the world. So we're going to tackle these questions for tonight, and then next week we're going to be starting with, I think I have the first 4 chapters because we talk about the churches a lot in those. So question number 1, excuse me, do we need to fear? So right on the screen here that you can see is I have 3 verses here, one from Deuteronomy 31:8, Romans 8:28, and Isaiah 43:1. And you can Google a whole bunch of verses that talk about fear and how God is for you amidst of all this stuff. So Deuteronomy 31:8, he'll never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Isaiah 41:1,
43.
don't, what?
43:1.
43:1, don't fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name, and you are mine.
There's another one in Isaiah, that's Isaiah 41:10, that says, "Have no fear, for I am with you. Be not afraid, for I am your God. I shall strengthen you and give you help and uphold you with my victorious right hand."
So do we need to fear?
No.
No. Just continue talking while I plug
Okay. Yeah, I think the Bible's pretty clear that fear is not good, not a thing that we're supposed to have. And it talks about the fear of God, but that is a different type of fear than we're talking about here. Um, so yeah, God also says like perfect love casts out fear, and God's love is perfect. So when we're relying on him and trusting in him completely, our fears can be taken away and abolished, and it's pretty sweet. It's hard to do sometimes, but it's pretty cool when it happens.
Yeah, so the quick answer is no, but I think it's a lot easier to say that than not, because we can say do not fear anything, and then you see what the world's in right now, and it's hard. Like, for the longest time now, we were fearing a disease. Now there's fears of riots and things like that. So saying to not have fear is a lot easier than said than done. So I guess it's where you lay your dependency constantly. So are you constantly trusting in God that he has the right circumstances and right choices for you, and the faith factors on that? Because if you were to even look at John's life, he was an old man that should have been killed multiple times, but didn't, and then was sentenced to this island. So did he have fear through all of this? Maybe. Like, I don't know the guy. So
I mean, he might have had fears, but he acted fearless.
yeah, and I think that's a really important point of, like, despite being afraid, going forward with that. And I think that counts into what God is expecting to us, despite the circumstances going forward. That's really interesting of how we approach fear. So, do we need to fear the book of Revelation? No, but I think we need to really take into account the words that are being said here, because there's a lot of serious words, and there's a lot of things that you should check into your faith about, and maybe have some God time and discuss that. Next question that we have here is, what are some uncomfortable things with Revelation? So this this kind of connects with what we were kind of talking about briefly at the end of the lesson about people who fall away. And this actually really connects to the post that I made last night, the ending thoughts that I have about this lesson. We got 3 passages here that talk about falling away, but when I was searching and researching, there's hundreds of verses in the Bible talking about people fall away, and that it's not a surprise when people do. At least when you think about scriptures, when it's constantly coming up as a theme, there, like, I feel like it comes up more than topics, other topics that are out there.
Didn't they tell us in third year that like 1 in 3 of us would no longer have faith in like 5 years or something like that?
Yeah, something
I
like
can't
that.
remember what the date
Which
was.
was super emotional because we look around the room. These are people that we've been with 3 years with, and the sobering mindset of don't get so hot-headed that can't happen to you, sort of thing. So I'm probably only going to do 1 Timothy 4:1 because I don't want to keep us too long. So 1 Timothy 4:1. Now the Spirit expressly says that in the later times some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and teaching of demons. That's really sobering to think about because you don't think that you're falling into different mindsets or different opinions out there that it's directly regarded from demons. But if your philosophies or if your truths are not Jesus and they're just in self, like, well, you have to maybe consider the options of like, okay, is it just yourself or are these being influenced by outside forces? And that's something that I think for all of us we have to consider quite a lot, because we might have an opinion, then we might have to justify it and things like that. And where that opinion is coming from is something to check out. When it's just an opinion on something, fine, whatever. But if it's something that goes deeper into faith, yeah. So some of the uncomfortable things about Revelation, I don't like the amount of death that happens in Revelation. I don't like the ending of things that happen in Revelation. I think this is why Revelation is not taught a whole lot in churches, or why people try to avoid it, because it talks about like a lot of intense things that happen to the world. It talks about like a third of the population get wiped out. The pestilence, plagues from Egypt, they come back, and that evil army that gets wiped out, where the blood is like as high as horses' bridles. Those are people that get influenced by the beast and Satan and coerced into his madness, and they get wiped out. And I don't those kind of things make me uncomfortable, but that's why we're hammering the point of having faith in Jesus and trusting in him completely. And so, yeah, there's uncomfortable things that even Jill and I don't like about this, but to process with that with God and to trust him throughout this and to strengthen our faith with it. Next question that we have is speculations. What are some things that you speculate through this? What are your thoughts? What are your speculations throughout Revelation?
Like specifically?
Yeah, sure.
You mean like about the rapture and the 1,000-year reign?
Yeah, some of those stuff.
Okay, well,
Don't go too much down the rabbit hole.
I hope that we're in the pre-trib where we get raptured and then
worse stuff
all
happens.
the crap happens, and then like Jesus comes back for those that are left behind, kind of following the Left Behind movies. But I kind of doubt that's what it is, because there's a lot about Christian suffering that's in the Bible. Like we don't escape the suffering necessarily. And lots of good can come from that, and we've talked about suffering before, but So it would kind of keep up with that. But I don't know, maybe not. It'd be nice. And then
See ya.
the 1,000-year reign of Christ. So we talk about that there is a time where Jesus comes and reigns for 1,000 years and Satan's locked up, which I don't really understand. But there are pre-millennials, millennials, and post-millennials, and none of them make sense to me except the I think. Like Jesus comes here and he reigns for 1,000 years. Like that makes sense. Millennialism, I think, is that
We're in it right
we're
now.
in it right now, which is
1,000-year reign happened.
hard to think that we're in
Years
a
ago.
time when Satan is locked up, because it seems he's very prevalent. And then the post is that there's 1,000-year reign of peace, I guess, and then Jesus comes back. I don't know. But pre or post, like probably one of
Stuff
those.
we'll probably get into once. I think it's chapter 19 that the 1,000-year
Yeah,
reign comes.
it's a long ways away, and this is like third year Bible college stuff that kind of made my head hurt a little bit. And again, ultimately, in terms of salvation, it doesn't matter. Like it's gonna, the events are gonna unfold. Jesus or like
It's
God
like the
has
biggest
it.
spoiler book ever.
God has it all planned out. It's gonna happen. You don't have to spend all day debating all the fine details, but it's
Leave that
interesting
for
to
the
talk about.
theologians to write their commentaries, and then we read them, and then we come back with the simple point of like salvation, Jesus.
And like over the years, there have been all sorts of speculations about who the Antichrist is, and that it's gonna be this one person that's like really sort of suave and takes over and cunning and very smart and all these different things. Like basically the Left Behind books. They're good. Like I've read
You're gonna
probably
mention
half
them
of
a
them.
lot, aren't
I
you?
have read I listened to the audiobooks, so probably half of them, but it's a good series. Anyways, so there've been all sorts of speculations, and like I feel like every time the States gets a new president, they're like, "Oh, this might be the one," or
I think
like,
they're saying Bill Gates now.
I don't know, probably like pretty much anyone who has lots of influence and power, somebody's called them the Antichrist at some point.
Holstein, I've heard.
That's so
Ben Shapiro, I've heard
What?
that.
That's
Too.
crazy.
Jewish
I mean,
podcaster that debates people.
I mean, it's probably going to be someone that sneaks up on us, because that's sort of Satan's thing. Is like it's not always blatantly obvious. It's sort of like boiling a frog in water. If you've heard that analogy, 'cause if you put a frog in boiling water, they'll jump out. But if you put a frog in water and then slowly bring it to a boil, it'll just die. It's really gross. But that's kind of how
I
Satan.
didn't do biology.
That's kind of how Satan works. Is like if he just was like, "Hey, let's sin," you'd be like, well, most of us would probably be like, "Nah, it's okay." I mean, sometimes we take the obvious stuff too, but
It
it's
just depends.
but it's more like
Free iPhone. Worship the beast.
yeah. But if it's more subtle, then it's way easier to be like, "Oh, this is okay. This is fine. It's fine." And then we're all of a sudden like, "Oh no, how did we get here?"
Last question is a question that I try to keep in all my lessons, and it's just a simple of where I'm at with Jesus. And so, for preparation for this lesson, I was saying to Jill last night that I really enjoy doing these lessons because it forces me to dig and do research, and I really appreciate that because I find that I gain this extra inspiration or connection with God with it, and it just fuels me. When we do right now media ones, I feel like there's less work in it because it's someone else that's done the prep and things like that, and I just have to showcase it, and I feel like I get a little stale or comfortable in that. And so for me, I'm excited about new things that Jesus is going to teach me, but I'm also excited about some of the things that we need to deal with in my life, because stuff that I've heard other pastors say is that through this time they've been hearing that there's more pruning, or there's more things that are being removed in people's life because the priorities are still out of whack. And so that's something to also consider with a lot of this, is where time is being spent, where effort is being spent, and how do we how do we balance it out, but also chase after God with everything that we have? And so right now I'm feeling really good with Jesus because I'm excited about some of the things, but I'm also aware of the challenges that are going to be coming with some of this and the topics. How about you? Where are you at with Jesus?
I've kind of felt like a little bit of a grab bag of emotions in the last 11 weeks or however long we've been in quarantine. It's been very up and down where there have been days. I think I've probably had more negative days than positive, but that's pretty normal. Um, where I'm just like, this is stupid. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, let's go back to normal things. Or just like struggling with, like, well, why doesn't just this happen? Or why doesn't that happen? Or why can't this just be done? Or whatever. But then there's also really good moments where it's like, oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like maybe I should, try this and things will go better. So, I don't know. It's a little bit of up and down, trying to be less negative and more trusting that, yeah, God does have what's best for me in mind. Um, and being okay with it, even if it doesn't look like what I would have chosen, because I've learned like over and over in my life that that is usually not the best option. Like I'll be like, "Ooh, this is a good choice," and God's like, "No," and I'm like, "I think it is," and He's like,
Uh.
"Maybe not," and then I'm like, "Oh man, that would have been a terrible choice."
And so, for some of people that have me on Facebook, you may or may not have seen this post last night because I feel like with everything that's kind of happening in the world, I think just thinking about the grand scheme of things is something important for us to consider. Um, yeah, there's lots of craziness in the world. There always has been. It's not a surprise, though, that things are bad or are getting worse. And the reason why I say that is because like I personally believe that like Satan and his legions of followers are constantly working at making people more divided than ever, because in division there's disagreements, there's angst, there's things that people find easy to fight about. And so it's no surprise to me that there's darkness in the world. Like when we see atrocities happening around the world, there's an enemy that's constantly making things worse that happens. And so I think something for us to be mindful of through these times is that yes, God is still in control, despite what you may feel with all this, and that there's an enemy out there that is working hard to make sure that things stay as corrupted as possible. And despite even having the ending, like, of what happens to him, like, he's still working as a goal to get as many people corrupted as possible for them to fall because man was made in God's image. And so the only battle strategy he has at this point is to corrupt as much as possible and to make sure that people are off to any kind of relationship with God, with Jesus. And if he can do that, then he's doing the one thing that he can do. And so for us going through these times, I think a strong encouragement is to be mindful of God, but also to be mindful of a ruthless enemy and to be on guard for those. Um, and I'll kind of leave it at that because I don't want to get any more in depth. Really, that's pretty much my stance is with Jesus, and that's essentially where I want to leave it at that because at the end of all, like once he comes back, none of this stuff is going to matter anymore. All these fights that I think that people find important aren't. it's not going to matter in the end of all of that. So my prayers for love and encouragement, and for us to be willing to extend that as much as possible. I mean, Jesus forgave the people that were murdering him on a cross. And so trying desperately to get to this scale where you can forgive, like that's empowering to me. So my hope is to continue as we get into this series to be encouraged and to be the encouragement in this world, because it's much easier to put up arms and to fight than to be humble and to be submissive during this time. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you guys are having an awesome time, and we are excited to continue this series. There's a few things I have in store with this, so hopefully they work out. And yeah, till next time, see ya.